Hello, everybody. Very proud to welcome you all to the Inspired Workplace, which for those that have not attended before, I'll do a just very, brief, quick introduction before I get us into the panel conversation. Today, the WorkProud is in the business of inspiring individual and company pride in workplaces around the country and around the world. We certainly believe that if individuals can feel proud of the things that they do, if they feel that they matter, then they're going to give the best versions of themselves. And while we should all work towards optimizing, pay and compensation strategies and models, we all want to get paid the most we can for the work that we do. The discretionary efforts available in all of us as human beings are brought out not necessarily or rarely from a comp model strategy or design, but actually from intrinsic or extrinsic motivations, and therein lies the subject and topic of inspiring and building pride. So to that end, for those that are interested, we've recently released the 2024 study on pride. Dr. Rick Garlick interviewed another 1,000+ individuals, collecting data on assessing what are the drivers, what are the inputs and outputs of individual and company pride. If you're interested in that, workproud.com/the report, and you can get a copy of the 2024 report and compare that against the 2021 version. You're also welcome to sign up for the Inspired Workplace newsletter, where we are sharing information and updates on different approaches that leading companies are taking towards building inspiring workplace cultures. And of course, we'd be very interested in sharing information about some of our client programs and the technology and platform we've deployed for them that is created to help facilitate and inspire cultures of workplace pride. Today, however, I am honored and pleased and proud to introduce to you Mr. Stephen Chipman. Stephen is a former CEO of both the North America and China practices of Grant Thornton. He is also a director at Stout, as well as a number of other boards, including Litera Microsystems, Prudential Financial Insurance, and Clyde and Company. And I think that I want to do a little plug for Stephen, that when we all grow up and ultimately come to that conclusion or phase in our workplace, this is certainly one that I'm inspired by, and that is to be philanthropic. And Stephen is leading or playing an active role in an organization, a charity called onesky.org. You can read about that. And that's helping young people who are raised in a difficult situation or circumstance maybe find a better path, generally in places around the world that don't normally get a lot of support and attention. So with that, I want to introduce you to Stephen. And the reason why I'm excited about today is often on the program we're hearing sort of from the tactical, operational, HR perspective on trying to build and inspire pride and inspired workplaces. And certainly when we're talking at that level, that's usually on the how to do it. But what I thought would be great for all of us to hear is a little bit about the perspective from the C-suite, from a standpoint of how do they see it? What do they see as their potential role? How to inspire that? How to potentially move some of these agendas? Because I think it's fair to say that everybody would like their employees to be proud of the work they do and proud of the company. The question is how to do that. And if the C-suite is involved, which I think we all know, well, what's their perspective? So without further ado, Stephen, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thanks for the kind and warm introduction. I'm absolutely delighted to be with you, your colleagues, and your audience today to talk about a topic which, as you know, I'm incredibly passionate about. I've been involved in professional and business services organizations my entire career. And the idea of how you can create a truly high-performing environment through extraordinarily motivated people who drive improved business performance, outstanding business performance is something that I'm extremely focused on, have been for a large part of my career, and love to talk about. So it's a topic that is a challenging topic. There are no silver bullet answers to how you improve engagement in an organization. It's hard, as I know everybody on this call will know, to move the needle on engagement. So I think it's great that we're going to spend some time today just reflecting on why do it, what it means to do it, how you influence and move an organization forward to embrace it, and what does it look like, and how do we know if we're making progress? You asked me, as a way to kick things off today, to think of a little anecdote or story or experience that I had that was relevant to the topic of engagement. And as I reflected on it, I reflected on the fact that at the heart of engagement is human connection, making a human connection. And I appreciate that, this story is a human connection with a very high profile individual. But what it did for me, the experience, allowed me to reflect on what it really takes, what it really means, and how you build those connections with people. So I'm going to just share that story very briefly now to kick things off. And I will say, as an immediate sort of proviso to this story, that this is not a political statement, so everybody can relax. I'm not about to start talking about politics. It just so happens that I was very fortunate about 10 years ago, a little longer now, to have the opportunity to meet the President of the United States, which is obviously in anybody's life an incredible moment. But what's interesting about this photograph is the story behind it and the way it impacted me and helped me develop my thinking around connections. I happened to be at a business meeting in Washington, D.C. with a number of other CEOs of large U.S. corporations, and President Obama was the speaker. It was a closed-door meeting, so there were no media, which he doesn't get to do or any president gets to do very often. And he did a Q&A. And as you might imagine, there were lots of questions about government shutdowns and debt defaults and euro crises and immigration challenges, all the, what's going on in China, all these sorts of things. And I was sitting in the audience and I thought, this is my one chance probably in my entire life to ask the President of the United States a question. And he must be so tired of all these same questions about the economy and international relations. So I put my hand up and he called on me. And I said, thank you for taking my question, Mr. President. I have 2 young daughters. We're going through back to school. I think my daughters are about the same age as your daughters. How's back to school going in the White House? And I held my breath because I thought, and I must admit, I got a lot of looks. As you can see, if you look closely at this picture, I sat next to Fred Smith, the CEO of FedEx. So these were the type of people in the audience, and I could hear a bit of a murmur as to who's this English bloke asking this weird question of the president. But he absolutely lit up, and he spent a good 5 minutes talking about his daughters, how back to school was going, how they're changing, now they're becoming teenagers. And you could tell that it really connected with him, the question. But the postscript of the story is what happened in this photograph, because he came down into the audience after he did the Q&A, and he did a meet and greet with a number of the CEOs. And he came up to me and he shook my hand, as you can see. And he said this. He said, "Thank you for your question. please go home tonight and tell your daughters that the President of the United States says hello. And I got to go home that night, and I got to sit down at dinner with my two young daughters and give them that message. And as I reflected on this, what it dawned on me was how I was able to connect with another human being based on taking a specific interest in something that was important to them. And then how that same individual was able to forge a deep connection with me and my family by reciprocating that interest and sharing something that he happened to have, which was his title, that would actually have a tremendous impact on me and my family. So what I've tried to do, and I apologize, Mike, it's probably a longer story than you wanted me to tell at the beginning of this, but I think what's important is what I took away from it is on a day-to-day basis, I'm asking myself all the time, am I really connecting with somebody? In every conversation, whether it be with a peer, whether it be somebody that I report to, whether it be someone that I'm working with, whether I'm on a team, whether I'm in a family situation or a social situation, am I really connecting? Am I really engaging with that individual? And so I think sometimes we get caught up with the notion of engagement in the workforce, and it becomes very programmatic. And I think as HR professionals, you're put in a situation where you're often asked to run programs, and inevitably that means you're doing your job and you're getting caught up in that because that's what you're being asked to do. But to really move an organization on engagement as an organization as a whole, I think it's much deeper than that. I think it's about behavior, and I think it's about changing behavior. It's about influence, and it's about connecting.
Well, how do you think we've been going so far then? Here's a recent Gallup survey.
Yeah, and you see, this is why I continue to be so passionate about this subject, because I'm so disappointed with the progress that we as a society have made. And this chart actually is not dissimilar to a number of other countries. And it's not through lack of effort, right? I mean, in the last 20 years, there's been a lot of focus on improving engagement, a lot of realization that engagement is important to the attraction and retention of talent. And we'll talk about that later in this discussion. And how many millions, billions of dollars of time and money have been poured into engagement efforts and programming. And we've made some improvement, as you can see, but given the investment that's been made, it's clearly not enough. And when you read stories about, the generations coming into the workforce today that are very disenchanted, very disengaged, really just sort of punching their clock and not feeling like they want to put any discretionary effort into their roles. I know that's a broad generalization, but we all read about it, right? And we probably witness it. I think we have to be really very honest with ourselves and say, we need to do something different, because whatever we've been doing the last 25 years hasn't really been working.
So a question before we, go deeper, that I think is on a lot of people's minds in our audience is, does the C-suite care either about this contextual sort of graph, which all of us have seen, whether this or versions thereof, or an internal survey? What's is it a visceral gut reaction only, or this is a real problem, or what have you observed in your time and the various perspectives? Is this important in the scheme of things?
Well, there's good news and bad news here, I think, in answer to your question, Mike. I mean, I think if you look at this graph, back in 2000, it probably was not a topic that was largely front of mind in the C-suite. For many, perhaps some of the larger professional service firms that were a little bit ahead of the curve in understanding this because it was having such a big impact on their businesses. But I think that's changed. And I think, generally speaking, in the C-suite, there's much more awareness of the importance of engagement. However, I would say there are far too many times that I think engagement is looked at very narrowly, as in this is about retention. You know, if our people are more engaged, we will get better retention of talent, as opposed to if our people are more engaged, we will experience more discretionary effort and our business results will improve. A more engaged workforce will directly correlate to improved business results. I think increasingly in the C-suite that's understood, but you'd be surprised how it's still sort of so often narrowly thought of as being just, this will help us improve retention. This slide's great because and there's all kinds of data out there. I think this is from Deloitte, but the most engaged organizations have stronger revenue growth, better productivity, higher performance in terms of client satisfaction, and of course, they what goes hand in hand with that, an outcome of all of that is better retention, which of course does impact the efficiency and the cost of the talent pool in the organization. So that's one thing. The other thing I'd say about the C-suite is you can't talk in generalities, because inside the C-suite you're going to find lots of different views. You're going to find the individual who's truly a advocate for the opportunity to drive engagement within the organization and sees everything that we've just talked about. You're going to have other individuals that are highly skeptical. They think it's just the soft stuff, and that more HR programs is just going to be more cost. It's not investment, it's cost. And then you'll have others that are, they kind of get it, they want to get it, but they're busy, they got other priorities. And key to all of that, of course, is where is the CEO and what is the CEO's perspective? Because I think it's probably not an exaggeration to say that the way that a C-suite team starts to build momentum around the things that you need to do to truly drive engagement in an organization ultimately has to be led by the CEO. And so one of the questions I'm sure on the minds of your audience today is, how do you influence, if you can, or encourage or support a CEO that wants to and understands the benefits of moving the needle? I would just mention one last thing on the C-suite topic. I was part of a couple of presentations sitting in the C-suite when I was not a CEO that moved the needle with people inside the boardroom. The first was we had an outside speaker at a retreat. He happened to be a very eccentric Norwegian professor called Professor Nordstrom, who wrote a book called Funky Business. It's 30 years old now, but it's still highly relevant. He actually, this guy was really interesting. He actually, in my view, kind of predicted the impact of social media before we even had social media. But anyway, I digress. One of the key things that Nordstrom said that resonated and really got people talking inside the C-suite, including the skeptics, was that the soft stuff is now the hard stuff. The soft stuff has become the hard stuff. And, what do you mean by that, et cetera, et cetera. But it really was a challenging perspective that got even the most significant skeptics in the room thinking about. And the second time I was in the boardroom, again, I was not the CEO. I was a member of senior management, just, part of the team. And a lot of these issues were on my mind, and I was a little bit frustrated. We weren't as focused on it as I felt we should be. And our head of HR came in and started talking about the business case for things that she felt we ought to be doing to move the needle on engagement. But the most powerful thing that she did was tell a story. It's probably a story that a number of people on the call have heard before, but it never gets old. And that's the story of the janitor at the Mayo Clinic. Have you heard this one, Mike? It's it's a very simple story. And there was a work study being done at the Mayo Clinic, and one of the questions was describe your job. And she was asked to describe her job, and she's a janitor, right? And she said, "I don't see my job as cleaning rooms. I see my job as saving lives." Just an amazing, powerful statement that gets to purpose, gets to engagement, that she felt a passion for what she did, even though it was a cleaning job, cleaning toilets, cleaning bathrooms, cleaning equipment, and the insides of people's rooms in a hospital, as more than just cleaning, but actually, because of the direct line of sight between the sanitization of those rooms and being part of the broader goal of saving lives, which that organization was focused on. So I watched inside the C-suite at that moment, people shift their perspectives on purpose and culture and engagement. So long-winded answer to your question, probably spawns a whole bunch of other questions, but I'll pause there.
Well, first, interesting, observation and comment. The soft stuff is now the hard stuff. And apropos, and it's just by coincidence that this slide is up. You made that comment. I was at a HR tech trade show a decade or so ago, and a gentleman from Deloitte approached and came up and said, "I think you're really focused on the right outcomes in terms of this idea of building pride." And he said it's because what is the US economy now when it has divested a large portion of its manufacturing base? Again, we don't know the future, but that was certainly appropriate at that time. So if we're a service company. If you're a service company, what is it that you're providing? You're providing services, and that requires a level of sort of emotional connectivity with your customers in order to do it successfully. So, you can't sort of programatize creating those experiences for your employees if you're trying to get them to deliver outstanding customer service. So, all right. So some great sort of context and lead up to get some more tactical, type of perspectives, from you. So let's begin with the idea of if the objective is to drive towards greater engagement, if that's the term that we want to use, or better satisfaction or a higher level of pride, they're interrelated. They're actually all about trying to access perhaps that discretionary effort. The role of support from leadership, right? Is it that important? Can you have ground up approaches, or is leadership a critical enabler, or are they a component? What's the perspectives that you've had, or the experiences that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, this is a very fundamental topic at the heart of what we're talking about today. Ultimately, I believe for an organization as a whole, it's got to be led from the top, and it's got to be led by the CEO, senior management board of the organization. However, getting to that place can take time. And also, I think there are lots of examples where organizations got to that place where these efforts were being led from the top because of grassroots efforts. And so I guess the answer to your question is it's both. And I'll tell you a story that is very pertinent to myself, because I had an experience of a grassroots effort that ultimately became something that the firm, my former firm, Grant Thornton, adopted both nationally and internationally. And I, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, I've always had a passion for this. And earlier on in my career, I was the managing partner of an office. Actually, it was the Dallas office. And we had for a whole variety of reasons, we had a lot of turnover. We were having retention problems. And also I felt very strongly that we weren't focused enough on these softer elements around engagement and purpose and culture. So I had the opportunity with the partners just in the local office to talk about this. And we came up with, I take no credit for this myself, it was a group effort. I challenged the local partners and managers, and we came up with this idea of something we called the Grant Thornton experience. And we discussed the Grant Thornton experience for our people and the Grant Thornton experience for our clients. And it was a very simple concept. And it was, if we are able to create a very positive experience, a wonderful experience for our people that highly motivates them and engages them, they will provide an incredible experience for our clients. And that those two things are intimately linked, and we can create truly a virtuous cycle that would be great for our people, great for our clients. Because if we provide great client experience, we're going to win new business, better clients, and those clients are going to create a better learning experience for our people, etc. And we spent a lot of time, we rolled it out in the local office. We got a lot of grassroots, ground up input from everybody in the office, from the receptionist through to the partners. And as a result, we figured out, gosh, there's a lot to this, right? There's all kinds of elements that we're going to have to address if we're going to create this Grant Thornton experience for our people, and all of which are very familiar to your audience around leadership and performance management and recognition and rewards and communications and transparency and some of our policies and work arrangements and the type of work people we were asking them to do and learning and development. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the pivot towards understanding that and working with our people to focus on improving that environment and that level of engagement, that in of itself created more positive engagement with our people and started to build this momentum towards the Grant Thornton experience for our people and our clients. We had success with that. It's a job that's never done, and we moved the needle, but you never stop. But what happened as a result was it got the attention of the leadership of the firm, and no good deed goes unpunished. I got asked to lead this initiative for the firm, and we actually built out a Grant Thornton Experience Leadership Council, which was made up largely of our youngest and highest performing up and coming young managers and partners across the firm. And over a period of multiple years, we developed it and rolled it out across the firm. Interestingly, one of those individuals that was on the inaugural Grant Thornton Experience Leadership Council is now the CEO of the firm, just as a sidebar, something I'm proud of as kind of an outcome of all of this. So the reason I'm telling this story is not because I'm suggesting we got it right, not going to suggest that this was a perfect solution, because it wasn't, and there was all kinds of challenges with getting this done. And, I think if you talk to anybody at the firm today, they'd still say it was very much work in process. But my point is that, going back to your question, this was grassroots that was able to influence the C-suite that ultimately was embraced by the C-suite and rolled back out across the firm. So it can be both. It should be both.
Mm. So related to that is, as that idea was formulating, what was the role and the nature of data? And for the audience attendees who'd submitted some of the questionnaires, I'm trying to paraphrase a number of questions into a unified. Sort of what do you use as the flint?
Yeah.
Is hard data necessary? If so, what kind of language and or data have you seen to be the most effective in trying to build a story that people can connect to if you want to move that cultural needle forward?
Yeah, it's a really important point, and I'm glad you called me out on that, because we wouldn't have got any of this off the ground without building what we called a compelling business case. So we just kept on talking about we have to have a compelling business case, otherwise we won't have success with this, and perhaps we shouldn't even be doing it. So what's a compelling business case? Well, it certainly does start with data. One of the things that we did that really, again, one of those moments, with those aha moments in the C-suite when, the direction of travel changes, it was a bit of an old school engagement survey. I think there's way better ways of monitoring engagement today. I'm sure many people on the call will do. But we had one of these old school, this was 20 years ago, engagement surveys, and we correlated the engagement by office, by department, by service line with business performance. And it was, it was shocking when the numbers went up on the screen, but shocking to many people in the room. It wasn't particularly shocking to me, but the geographies and service lines with the highest engagement scores were the highest performing business units, and the business units with the poorest engagement scores were the lowest performing business units, had the highest turnover of people. And it was just clear. And so that became sort of the ground zero of the business case. Now, you could argue correlation, causation. We sort of looked past that and said, look, let's just apply some common sense here to this. There must be a correlation, and it supports what we already instinctively think is the right answer here. So that was a huge part of building the compelling business case. We also went out and looked at other organizations. We did get some outside help to give us some perspective on building the business case. And then we measured what we did. So we weren't perfect at measuring what we did, but we tried hard to put sort of a balanced scorecard type approach in place around the engagement efforts to see if we were moving the needle. So that we could keep coming back and saying, is this working? Is it not working? Are we getting a return for the effort?
So very interesting things to break that apart. So the first thing to see, sharing with the audience, this is a fair statement. This area of correlating an employee experience that would be maybe measured by a survey and an engagement result, as we're using now, is not super scientific and mathematically accurate, but directionally consequential.
That's what we concluded back 20 years ago when we were embarking on this journey.
Okay, so for those in the audience that are sort of listening and nodding, what I will share with you is building these programs, and in those conversations across some 500 plus clients, the consistency is, it is not hard lines. These are dotted directional lines, and in my view, that's fine, because that's all we've got. And human beings and organizations as extensions of large numbers of human beings don't necessarily work in dead straight lines, but they move and bend, but their trajectories and their themes and their directions are consequential. Would you agree that in making a business case internally to the C-suite, you don't have to have 3 decimal points of accuracy, right? But actually, that the C-suite understands that the science doesn't have to say it was 11.5 IRR, but no, this is what we observed, etc. So do you want to comment and share with
how
to bring that data in a way that it connects to the story and is then going to, change potential directions, i.e. get budget support?
Totally agree. It's sort of a triangulation, or a multiple-legged stool, if you like, right? It's certain things coalescing, like those aha moments around the soft stuff becoming the hard stuff, the Mayo Clinic story, the fact that we our own business judgment is telling us that we've got an issue, the sort of common sense that exists around the fact that more highly motivated people are going to perform at another level, and then the data and probably other factors. It's sort of all of that coming together. At the end of the day, though, to your point, it's leadership applying good business judgment based on all of those factors, not just relying on a set of data to drive that decision. But the data can certainly assist and is important. But and it goes back a little bit to my characterization of the C-suite. You know, all those different people sitting in the C-suite, from the highly skeptical to the, you know, I personally, I didn't need to see the data. I just felt so strongly that this was the right thing to do and was going to be successful. I personally didn't need to see the data. There are other people in the room that need to see the data, or at least have some data to support for them to be able to get behind these initiatives. And then you mentioned something else, though, in passing. I just want to not let it go. You said get the budget. So yeah, there clearly is budget associated with driving engagement, but I think that we just be a little bit careful about that, because sort of budget implies initiatives and programs. Initiative and programs are important, but what we're really talking about here is changing behavior. And changing behavior is really, really hard. How do you change behavior? And one of the things that we concluded was that you as a leader and as leadership, you have to find a way to provide insights to your people that create those aha moments for them that change their behavior. Because this changing culture and improving engagement is not a corporate game. It's an individual game. Every individual has to change to embrace this. So corporate programs are good. Corporate efforts are good. Corporate initiatives are good. But at the end of the day, you have to provide the leadership and environment and the insights that are going to cause or allow or have individuals embrace personal change in their behavior. That is hard, but when it happens, it's magic.
Yes, human beings, not easy to change. However, I will share a slight observational, commentary. Mm-hmm. Some a bit self-serving, but some just a reflection of. We used to all use travel agents until we booked our own travel ourselves. We used to all go to the shops because we had to see the goods until we didn't anymore. We would never buy clothes online because we couldn't until we didn't. We'd do our banking in branches until we didn't. And that the role of technology can be a facilitator or conduit of new types of human-to-human interactions. For many parents will understand that their conversations with their children are now defined by text, and that the social constructs of younger generations extend outside the schools and into the communities because they have the means by which they can connect with each other.
So I think you're absolutely right about that, and herein lies a massive opportunity, right? Because the technology that's now available to us to provide communication, recognition, feedback, to elevate, to bring those, create those connections, like we talked about with my photograph at the beginning of this session. The technology is a massive facilitator of that, and it was a tool that I would have loved to have had 20 years ago, because the ability to leverage the technology to make those connections, to provide that recognition, to be a platform for transparent communications that build trust, to tell stories, 1,000 times over of the lady that is saving lives, not just cleaning rooms. That's the type of thing that creates the insights that change behavior.
Mm. So I want to just jump on that. It was a comment shared in a New York Times article I read, but the percentage proportion of the influencers in the social media environments that are generating content relative to the passive users that are consuming the content is so ridiculously outweighed that you put that in the context of a corporate setting, and that is a small number of positive, dedicated message and content generators can become significant influencers that still permeates and effuses the positive energy and amplifies the stories within the organization. Even if everybody is not an active storyteller and contributor, they still get to generate and benefit from the stories that they're seeing and interacting with. So not everybody has to be a generator of recognition posts. It'd be lovely if they did, to have the big benefit of the storytelling and its deployment and amplification in platforms that allow for the stories to repeat and to be retold and to be represented, etc.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And in there, I think, I've been asked many times over the years, how do you define leadership? And, there are so many different definitions of leadership. The definition that I have always felt was the most relevant for me is that leadership is the ability to influence with or without authority. And the power of influence and the importance of the ability to influence in leadership, I believe, is critical. And if you have the tools and technology and platforms to be able to extend your influence beyond just that immediate individual that you're connecting with, that's extremely powerful.
Mm. All right, so I think we've gone through, numbers 1 to 4 pretty confidently. What about challenges and objections and how to sort of overcome them? Here's another HR investment request.
Mm-hmm.
We're dealing with other issues we've got going at the moment. Pricing changes and inflation. How do we keep? What are things that you might suggest to the audience to keep in mind, knowing that there will be objections and obstacles to any initiative like this?
Yeah. Well, and it's extremely difficult for HR professionals, right? Because they're charged with driving implementation. There's often cost associated with that and budgets, and obviously it often requires getting significant amount of time and input from the line business. So I think an important matter in here that needs to be discussed is which gets to your question here in a moment, Michael, is the role of HR. And I'm a huge believer in the strategic importance of HR and HR being a strategic partner to leadership. And far too often, I still see this, I see the HR function being cast in a role of compliance, being cast in a role of delivering on programs. I don't see enough ownership being taken by the business leaders, and I see HR not being given the opportunity to fully deliver the value that could be delivered from the experience and knowledge and capabilities of those individuals. So how does that shift? Well, I think it cuts both ways. We've talked about how leadership needs to be more aware and how you change the views of leadership. I would encourage the HR professionals on the call to also think about what they might do differently to position themselves as a strategic business partner rather than the deliverer of a program. And I recognize that that's not always easy, depending on who you're working with, who you're reporting to. But if you can build credibility with the business unit leadership or line business drivers, to deliver value, whether it's value around recruiting, whether it's value around the performance management program, whether it's value around the compensation process, but it's more than just sort of getting it done. It's really about helping that individual be more successful with their business because they were able to better align the knowledge and experience of HR with their business objectives. That credibility spills over then into overcoming some of these objections and barriers and challenges to driving engagement. Not going to sit here and suggest that's an easy thing to do, but I think if it's front of mind and center of mind, kind of on a daily basis, how am I going to deliver value to the business above and beyond just achieving my day job objectives, and how am I going to build that connection with the business leaders and the credibility such that I'm in a position, or we're in a position, to partner with the business to drive these engagement related initiatives.
That sort of leads into a question of where is the role of HR growing and evolving, particularly in this technologically transformative period of time we're in. They used to be, I would surmise, an administrative type function granted sophisticated administration with benefits and payroll and taxation is very complicated. Two, is that being managed by technology a lot more, and thus the role of HR within the organization? How would you comment on that?
I think it's a huge opportunity for the HR organization, because I think you can, as the technology continues to improve and be of wider use, to your point, Michael, you can shift a lot of, what I used to call, keeping the trains running on time work to technology support, which should free up more time to provide more value-added business support, more of a strategic support for the business. Now it's good news and bad news, right? Because some HR professionals are going to love that and embrace that. Others, might be challenged by that and potentially a little threatened by that, which I understand. It's a shift. But I think what it does is emphasize even more the need to develop as an HR professional those business partner strategic skills, because I think you're going to see HR continue to move more and more into that space, particularly as we get the opportunity to use technology for the more compliance and keeping the train running on time aspects of human resources, which is a good thing. I think it's good for HR, and it's certainly good for the business, and it's good for the people in the organization, but it's a transition.
Right. Once the trains are running, very well, they'll still obviously need maintenance. Mm-hmm. Now the orientation goes, my job is to evolve the people, their skills, and access their discretionary effort, whether personalized and the ability to do that, or do that more often, or programmatized at size and scale. I guess that's the great opportunities for if to the, my earlier comment about the Deloitte gentleman says, most companies' biggest expense, not all, is their, labor, right? That's the biggest expense. Mm-hmm. Then if that's the most expensive machine, in the factory, so to speak, our people, well, then we've got to really optimize for them or from them, and thus discretionary effort access, becomes the basis and foundation for more substantial business cases, to be made. Would you agree with that?
Yes, because I'll get the big professional service firms are a perfect example of this. That for many, many years, HR was basically considered a cost center. And now I think if you go into any of the really big, sophisticated professional service firms, they see HR as a strategic partner, as to helping and being a critical part of leadership's effort to get the appropriate return on investment in the labor pool. and to not only that, and that return on investment comes in a lot of different ways, but it in part comes through a highly motivated, engaged workforce that do great work for clients. It's back to my sort of Grant Thornton experience for the people and Grant Thornton experience for the clients. So I think in different industries and different sectors that we're in different stages of that shift already occurring. But it is a trend that I believe is going to continue and gather momentum.
So, we're drawing, to an end. So I want to bring it back to one of the foundational, reasons I asked you to be part of this call, which is to help us all understand as an audience, when we're thinking about taking an initiative to try and access better discretionary effort and create employee experiences and use different means. Ultimately, we're going to be looking for resources and budget being and time being and interest and attention. How should we route those communications? Is there a consistent way to route that? Do we route that through total rewards? Is it through communications compensation, straight to the CHRO, right to the CO, go to operations? How do we read within our sort of worlds, because all of our worlds may be different on the call, our sort of potential steps forward, going up to make this initiative have the visibility we'd like it?
You need an advocate in the business. It doesn't have to necessarily be somebody in the C-suite, but it needs to be someone that is listened to and has some influence. And hopefully that advocate is in the C-suite, because it's a lot easier if they are. It's a lot easier if they're the CEO. But even if they're not in the C-suite, you need an advocate, someone that really gets it and wants to support this and can help you craft it in a way that is going to be digestible for the business and the business is going to see as truly value added. That's a generalization, but I think if you don't have that, then it's extremely difficult.
Right. And an advocate, for the purpose of those that may not necessarily have used that term in the context of this, is
sponsorship. Someone that's going to stand by, side by side with you and your organization and promote to the organization, to leadership of the organization, and make the case for why this needs attention and investment and focus.
And could be HR, not necessarily, or less likely, so that when HR comes, because HR tends to actually want to do this already, you like, yes, you should be looking outside of HR intentionally because you're going to bring HR along.
If I wasn't clear, this person needs to be outside of HR and in the business.
Right.
Delivering,
Yeah, so that's a bit of a magic key trick for everybody on the call. Again, not that I've got some expertise, but to see what we all talk about and hear it from Stephen's perspective is a reminder of what these initiatives we're talking about sort of look like, especially within a world of highly competing initiatives that are all vying for attention, all of which have various merits. But, I believe in the power of this because of the huge contributions that the individual makes within organizations and then individuals make within organizations. So the importance of trying to get them connected to mission and purpose and appreciation pays out, certainly relative to almost any other, sort of initiative the company can do. So,
Mike, just one. I want to make this point just before we wrap up. At the end of the day, people make choices. Individuals are going to choose whether or not to provide that discretionary effort. We've used that term a few times on this call, and they're going to choose to do it because they're inspired by the purpose of the organization. They see it as an opportunity to improve their own skill sets. they have a personal desire to exceed expectations. That's kind of just driven by who they are, because they believe that they will be recognized and rewarded. There are lots of different things that are going to drive that individual person's decision. And so one of the things that we all have to do if we're going to be successful with driving more engagement with the organization is to be able to provide an environment and a culture and the leadership within the organization and the trust and transparency from that leadership that's going to create the most fertile opportunity for those individuals to make those choices. Because ultimately, they see it as being good for the organization, but good for them. It's aligned. It's not an either or, it's an and. This is good for me in my career, good for me personally. It's also great for the organization, and that those two things go hand in hand. And we have mutual success together. And I think I'm going to stop there. I just want to make that point because you can't force anybody to do anything, right? They have to want to do it, and they have to be motivated.
I like that conclusion. So thank you for sharing that, Stephen. So just bringing it to conclusion. First up, our next event on July 12th features a larger panel with some experts from a variety of different HR functions. That's June 12th at 12 p.m. Hopefully you're available to share too. Stephen's contact information. We won't be providing his personal information, but there's his LinkedIn profile if you'd like to connect with Steve and reach out to him directly. I can't speak on behalf of Stephen, but thank you very, very much, Stephen, for your time and wisdom. There will be a recording of this. We'll have the recording set up onto the website within a couple of weeks. And, on behalf of the WorkProud community, Stephen, thanks for taking the time. All the best. And everybody remember the One Sky initiative if you feel like supporting a very worthwhile charity endeavor and a way to say thanks to Stephen for his time today. We certainly will on behalf of the WorkProud team. Thanks, everybody, and be safe wherever you are. Hopefully the weather is improving and not bad. All the best to you.
Thank you very much.